up, you guys? Welcome back to the Aussie Grid Girl podcast. I think we're up to episode 4 now. That's so bizarre to me. And you guys know from the first couple episodes that usually I record this with a coffee. Today, we're recording with a glass of wine. It's Yolumbra Estate vegan wine. I'm not vegan, but it's vegan wine. The Y series Pinot Grigio. It's quite nice. And after the week that we have had, I feel like the 2 weeks that we've had, especially as a Ferrari fan. Yes, I know I'm wearing a Red Bull shirt. I'm wearing a Max Verstappen shirt. I like Max Verstappen too, okay, guys? You're allowed to like more than one driver at a time. Definitely didn't have this conversation with somebody on Twitter earlier today. I might have. But before we get started, what I would like to say is, now I talked about these things in my hands on TikTok, but I also felt like I wanted to share them with you guys with the podcast. So if you are on TikTok or on the creative side of TikTok or on the F1 side of TikTok, you will see there are a lot of content creators that are using TikTok to promote their small businesses for products that they make. What I have in my hot little hands is 3 scrunchies and a keyring that were made by the lovely Scrunchies by Pixie. And she does F1 scrunchies and she does F1 keyrings and she does a whole bunch of other scrunchies and keyrings as well. I would just like to share with you guys the things that I bought. So I bought a Ferrari keychain because of course I bought a Ferrari keychain. Mostly because she was out of Ferrari scrunchies. Oh, well, Charles Leclerc scrunchies anyway. I have this lovely green and purple Daniel Ricciardo scrunchie. And as you can see, it's got the 3 and then the logo and all that jazz. And then we've also got a Nico Hulkenberg 27 scrunchie, which is green, which also goes with the green scrubs that I got for work the other day. And then I also have this wonderful MV1 blue scrunchie, and these are awesome. My hair's quite thin actually because I undercut it a few years ago, and it never really grew back properly. And they are great for my hair, and I love them. So small plug for her there. But let's get started and let's talk about the last couple of races that we've had. So we've had the Monaco Grand Prix and we have had the Spanish Grand Prix. So we've had Monaco and Barcelona. Obviously, we were meant to have the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix in Imola, but as everybody knows, Imola and the Emilia-Romagna region in Italy is currently underwater. There's been some really, really, really bad flooding. Congratulations and good on you to Yuki Tsunoda, who lives in Faenza, drives for AlphaTauri, and he was helping out with the cleanup in Faenza, and a bunch of the drivers have been doing a lot for charity to raise money for the region. Charles Leclerc auctioned off his Monaco race suit, individual pieces. So he did his gloves, his helmet, the race suit, and his boots. And I think he raised something like 138,000 pounds, euros or something like that, which is insane. I love that people were happy to give that much for a race suit. And that he volunteered to sell that for charity to raise money. The Team Redline Boys, which is the sim racing team that Max Verstappen has a lot to do with. And if you follow them on Twitch, sometimes he's on their streams, otherwise sometimes he's not. And oh my god, they are the funniest Twitch channel. I love them so much. Coming only second behind the Quadrant team. Shout out to you, Lando, and the Quadrant guys and girl. And they did some charity races, which Lando was actually a part of. Wasn't planned to be a part of and then ended up being a part of last minute. And they did like 4 sim races over the weekend of Emilia-Romagna on the Sunday. And they had a donation link on their screen that you could donate to. And I will probably pop the donation link into the box below or into the pinned comment actually, if you guys are able to donate. But anyway, let's get into it, shall we? So, I always worry when Monaco comes around because all I want in life is to see Charles Leclerc have a good Monaco race. Now, what could have been last year and the year before, but we're trying not to focus on that. And as it turns out, what this year could have been. Now, if you didn't watch qualifying, Charles Leclerc qualified 3rd. So he was going to start his home race in P3 and he was going to do amazing and I had faith. And then Ferrari ruined it all with their strategy and with his race engineer not telling him things he needed to know. So if you don't know what happened, basically what happened was Lando was on a hot lap behind Charles Leclerc. Charles didn't know until he couldn't really do anything about it that Lando was on a hot lap, and he ended up blocking him inadvertently. And because of that, he received a 3 pace grid penalty. So he actually started sixth and actually finished sixth, which was nice to see, because usually where it's always good when well, obviously you want to finish higher up than where you started, but he definitely didn't finish below where he started, which is a bonus. And it almost turned out that way, and it could have been what could have been with that race. But yeah, it's just that now a lot of people made a point of saying this over the weekend, specifically a lot of the older drivers that are on commentary, and people like Simon Lazenby and David Croft, shout out to you, Crofty, made the comment of saying that it's just a gentleman's agreement. I think Jenson Button said this also. It's a gentleman's agreement that you don't stop in the tunnel, and you don't block people in the tunnel in Monaco, which I get it, but if you don't know that someone is on a hot lap behind you and you know that you need to create space in front of you, I don't see a problem with it. I completely understand, like, why that's an issue that they worry about, but, unfortunately. But what could have been, hey? What could have been? And I don't really think anyone was prepared for just prepared for how much that was going to hurt people. And Charles himself, there was quite a lot of photos from that weekend that were a little bit hard to look at, because you can see the emotion on his face, and he's clearly struggling and is upset about it, which, fair enough. But what can you do, huh? Unfortunately, you can't really make much of a difference. But we didn't just have the F1 race in Monaco. We had the F2 race and the F3 race. Now, there was some nasty shunts in the F2 race. Particularly, probably the worst one that I saw was Jack Doohan. And he was doing so well, and it was looking like it was going to be a really good race for him. And it just didn't materialize into something good, because he ended up dropping it out of a corner and just completely lost it and trashed his car. And as we saw over the weekend, there was quite a lot of people trashing their cars. Checo Perez, I'm talking about you, my friend. Now, if anyone didn't see that, it was during qualifying. Checo was out in Q1 because he crashed his car rather spectacularly. I think it was going into like the first or second corner during quali, and there was no way that they were bringing that car back from the dead for the rest of qualifying. So we kind of had the expectation that it wasn't going to be a good race for him, because it's notoriously hard to pass in Monaco, although apparently nobody told Kevin Magnussen that, because he did quite a lot of overtaking during the race in Monaco, and it was just a shame that he ended up DNFing in the end. It was quite upsetting to see, actually. I think we also had a DNF from Lance Stroll, and I think my favourite thing, Lance Stroll as well. I think my favourite thing about it was once it got wet, that's when things got interesting. But particularly with Lance Stroll, he ended up losing his front wing, going into one wall, and then not being able to turn the car to get out of it, and turn to not hit a second wall because his front wing was trapped under the front of his car. So it was a little bit of a disaster. And look, I feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Come find me on TikTok or on Twitter or on Instagram. Feel free to come and tell me that I'm wrong when I say this. George Russell and a certain people on commentary for Sky, mostly British people, and one of these people, I love her so very much, but George Russell had been kind of pushing the narrative in Monaco that he would have finished on the podium, but a strategy call changed that. I don't know what race George thought he was in, or what race they were watching that he was in, but he was nowhere near being on the podium ever in that race. Like, even when it started raining and everybody had to go in for slicks and change their tires, like, it was just, there was no way. Like, there was no way that he was going to end up on that podium. I'm sorry, I'm probably going to upset people by saying that, but it is what it is. It's fine. It was never going to happen. He was never going to be on the podium in Monaco. But overall, considering it was Monaco, and I know a lot of people complain about Monaco and say that it needs to be taken off the calendar and that it's a boring race, I enjoyed it. I always enjoy Monaco. I think it's a gorgeous track, and I love just watching people drive around it. But there was quite a lot of like, if you've been on TikTok since those races, you would have seen quite a lot of amusing videos with like Mario Kart music of people like hitting walls, like Logan Sargent, for example, kind of like slowing down and like just tapping the wall in in the chicane, and just yeah, it was it was good. I think weather is always going to be something that plays a part in the race, and the weather also really kind of did make Max have to work for it. He led pretty much the whole race, which is the norm. Just as I've said time and time again on this podcast, the Red Bulls are just so fast. Like the DRS and the drive and the floor and their wings and their side pods, just everything works so well on that car. Speaking of the floors, now this happened to Mercedes, and it also happened to Red Bull, where there was some giant cranes beside the track that they were using to lift the cars up. And if you saw, and if not, you've now seen the photos, there was flying cars, flying F1 cars, and everybody got some really nice looks at the floor of the Mercedes and the floor of the Red Bull. Now, I know you can't tell much from the outside of the floor, but being able to see that part of the car for all of the other teams is kind of a big deal. Like, Toto was understandably upset about the whole situation of the car being lifted after Lewis had a crash. He was fine. And it just, like, it wasn't a bad one. And it's understandable. Like, they work so hard on their secrets and all that kind of stuff. So that happened. And then we had a lovely, lovely podium. And it was a different podium than what anyone was expecting. And a different podium than what I was expecting. But oh my God, it was a great podium. And I think my favourite moment of the Monaco weekend was Esteban Ocon finishing third. And his Esti Besties on the podium, baby, during his post-race interview kind of made my day. And then also as he got up onto the podium, he knocked his bottle of champagne over, and Max kind of came over and stood it up, and it was quite lovely. And yeah, it was just, I was so happy seeing Esteban on the podium. Like, I think he's such a great driver, as he's proved a few times now. It's not his first podium. He has been on the podium a couple of times. That he's a great driver. And once Alpine get their shit together again, crap together again, I think there's a rather big chance there for himself and for Pierre Gasly to kind of show how good they are. Like, we know that Pierre is good, even though he didn't really show that when he was driving the Red Bull. But we know that Pierre is good. And once he gets a car underneath him that can actually propel him, I think he's going to do really well. And we all sort of had to we all had to sort of accept that Pierre was never going to get back in the Red Bull, unfortunately, which I would love to see. I think he deserves another chance. But Checo doesn't really seem to be going anywhere. He's been quite competitive for the first few races. The last two races have been a bit for him. But, what can you do? I think the thing about Monaco is that it is proven that it is possible to overtake. 2018, for example, Max started at the back of the pack and didn't finish there. I think he finished I'm pretty sure he finished in the points in Monaco. I may or may not have written that down. I will tell you. Give me a moment. Yeah, Monaco in 2018, Max finished 9th and started towards the back of the grid due to penalties. So it is possible to pass in Monaco. I think it's just, you have to pick your battles and you have to pick your moments. And obviously, again, it is possible because Kevin Magnussen did quite a few overtakes as well. He was doing some really nice work in the lower part of the pack at the race. And I would really love to see him. Like, I'd love to see Kevin in a fast car as well. Like, I think he has potential, and there's possibilities for him to do really, really well. He's proved it before when he put the the Haas in I think it was P6. And I think he won the sprint race, one of the sprint races last year, or qualified on pole for the sprint race last year. I can't remember which one it was though, but I'm pretty sure he did. Yeah, I might have to fact check that one, but I'm 99% sure that he did put the Haas on pole last year. Pretty sure it happened. Let's have a quick chat about Mercedes in Monaco, shall we? Now, George got a 5-second penalty for rejoining the track unsafely after he came off in the wet, and he coming back on the track ended up being that Checo hit him. Maybe that was a little bit of karma for what happened to Max in Baku, with George crashing into him. But George didn't have any like major damage from what I saw. I could be wrong. But yeah, so George ended up getting a 5-second penalty, and he was convinced that he was faster than Lewis and wanted the team to tell Lewis to let him pass. Like, he wanted to use team orders to get in front of Lewis, and was like, even with the penalty, even if I get ahead of him, if I don't get 5 seconds ahead of him, so he ends up in front of me, then I'll let him take the place back. And it's like, bro, no, like, that's not how it works. I think I actually made it, like, I've got it open on my phone. Well, I don't have it open. It's just like George was a still 49. Like, he finished 17 seconds behind Lewis and finished almost 20 seconds behind Ocon in P3. So I'm not really sure where this whole him being on the podium thing came from. Because even without his 5-second penalty, like, he was still 15 seconds behind Esteban Ocon and like 12 seconds behind Lewis in 4th. So again, I'm not really sure what was going on there. And he was lucky that he managed to get quite a fair way ahead of Charles, as well. Like, I don't know what happened to the Ferrari in Monaco. Like, he should have been way, way further up in the race. And I was convinced there was potential for him to take George at least, or even stay a little bit closer to George so he could have taken the place based on the penalty. But it just didn't happen. And there's just no words for how I feel about Ferrari at the moment. You can obviously see, I went the wrong way. You can obviously see I've still got my Ferrari flag here. Like, that's never going to change. Like, I'm never going to stop supporting Charles, and I'm never going to stop supporting Carlos. Like, but Ferrari seriously need to get their stuff together. Like, I can't wait to see how Fred Vassar kind of turns the team around. It's obviously not going to happen overnight, and it's probably not going to happen this season, and we're going to get stuck with a Ferrari tractor for the whole season. And we're also going to end up with a McLaren tractor. And there's just some tractors. Let's be honest, guys. There's just some tractors from teams that we expected to doing better. Speaking of the McLarens, the boys were one lap down, both of them, Lando and Oscar. Lando and Oscar were both in the points in Monaco in P9 and P10. They were a lap down. It doesn't tell me their times. But P9 and P10, so it was a double points finish for McLaren with their Triple Crown livery. The Triple Crown livery looks amazing. I'm really upset that they're not using it anymore. I feel like they should just change it to that for the whole season, because it looks much better color-wise than what we have at the moment. Not that I don't like orange. As you can see, it's quite an orange day today for me. I've got orange and I've got orange. My lights were orange, but they were making my camera do weird things. So sorry guys, you get stuck with blue lights. But McLaren's like blue and orange, so it's fine. I'm disassociating from everything Ferrari at the moment just because I'm having such a hard time. And I just, yeah, look, I'm going to quickly tangent. I apologize. I'm going to tangent about the fact that on the internet at the moment, people are like, oh, you can't support Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. You have to support one or the other. That's not how it works. You can support whatever driver you want, and you can support as many drivers as you want. Do whatever the hell you like. I am a big supporter of Max Verstappen and Lando and Charles Leclerc and Nico Hulkenberg. Like, you can support more than one driver. Anyone that tells you you can't, do whatever you want. Um, I apologize. Sorry. Back on topic. So I think Monaco was actually quite an interesting race for once, which was nice. Now let's. I wish I could skip over this and just pretend that it didn't happen. But let's talk about Barcelona. Let's talk about Barcelona. If you didn't see the race, you're going to misunderstand where this complete pain in my face is coming from. And where just the big, deep breaths come from in regards to Barcelona. Now, we had some upgrades in Barcelona. We had new side pods on the Ferraris. During P1, and I think it was might have been in P2 or definitely in P1, they had the new side pods on Carlos's car and they had the old side pods on Charles' car. It was pretty much the way that you expected it to go based on my complete lack of... based on my reaction. But pretty much the Ferrari tractor was being the Ferrari tractor. With the old side pods, it was still being a bit of a tractor with the new side pods, but a better sort of tractor. They were also doing some tire tests, which was quite cool, with certain tires during practice, and they've also got Pirelli testing happening at the moment with new tires. We've got some lovely pictures of Mick Schumacher driving the Mercedes, which is quite exciting. And the Ferrari admins have been a little bit cheeky with some of the content they've been dropping of their boys during these tire tests. I'm definitely not complaining about it, just making an observation. So qualifying was qualifying. Let's just look at this, shall we? So in P20, out in Q1, we had Logan Sargent. Also out in Q1, Valtteri Bottas, P16, Kevin Magnussen in P17, Alex Albon in P18, and yes, I did do that. I went from 20 to 16 and skipped a number because it breaks my heart because I have to say that Charles Leclerc was P19. P19, guys. P19. The guy that was on pole last year. P19. In saying that, with the new layout of Barcelona, now that they've taken out that chicane and turned it into a corner instead. So Charles' pole qualifying lap time was 1:22 something last year. His Q3 time that he went out in, 1:14. So having that chicane taken out, even for the guys that are down and out in Q1, it's quite a big difference in the times of the how much the track evolution is with the new corner. A lot of the drivers actually were talking how they were going to have to manage their tires because of the tire deg of this track, because it's quite a lot of right-hand corners, so managing the front left and the rear left tires was going to be the challenge that everybody was going to have. Now, I'm convinced that there were gremlins of some sort in Charles' car because it was doing some weird things. And he ended up getting quite a few penalties and starting from pit lane anyway because they had to replace a whole bunch of parts on his car. Thanks, Facebook. So there's that whole thing, you know. But, you know, we digress. We live and we learn. I might actually end up crying if I've done this the wrong way. Oh God, let's hope that I've done this podcast right and I don't have to re-record it. So yeah, they were quite worried about tire degradation and having to look after their tires and nurse their tires a little bit because there was quite a lot of right-hand turns in Barcelona. So the left side of the car is what's getting affected most. Oscar Piastri was also saying that it was quite a workout on the neck as well because of the G-forces of that turns, because they're more used to left-hand corners than they are right-hand corners. But I think, unfortunately, we went back to Barcelona, and it wasn't a bad race. It was a good race, but it was just a race. Like, we've had some really, really exciting races. Like, Monaco was exciting because we got rain towards the end of it that completely shook everything up. And Australia was obviously what Australia was. We had Baku, which had, all the biffo between. I was gonna say Lewis out of habit there. Had a bit of the biffo between Max and George, and then we obviously had the sprint race in Baku as well, which kind of made a big difference. But Barcelona was one of those races that kind of just was. I enjoyed qualifying more than I enjoyed the race in Spain, which I know I say that after I've just had a moment of being sad about Charles Leclerc, but we also lost like Perez and George Russell in Q2, and I think it's important to note that we lost George in Q2 to P12, considering where he finished in the race. And we lost Perez as well, and there wasn't really anything wrong with the Red Bull. That was just how it went on the day. Some people that I was really, really impressed with in Barcelona in qualifying was Hulkenberg managed to finish in the top 10 as well. Pierre Gasly qualified P4. And my other sweet favorite, Lando Norris, qualified P3. And there was a really sweet moment, which I recommend you go and look it up on YouTube or on TikTok. There was a really, really sweet moment where when Max got out of the car and he turned around and realized that Lando was P3, he walked over and waited for Lando to get out of the car so he could shake his hand. And just on his face, like he was so excited. And in the post-qualifying interview, he was asked about the other two that were starting, P1 and P2 and P3 with him. And he was a bit like, well, I expected Carlos to be there, but I didn't expect Lando to be there. And he's like, no, well, I expect Lando to be there because Lando's always quite high up. I didn't expect the McLaren to be there. And I think that was really sweet. And I think it sort of shows the friendship that those two have. That even though Max was, saying that the McLaren's not that good, he always sort of expects Lando to finish quite high up on the grid because he knows that Lando is a good driver. So heaven forbid what happens when Lando gets a good car underneath him as well. Like, that kid's gonna go places. And I say a kid because he really is just a kid. They're all kind of kids really still. Carlos and De Vries are kind of like the older kids, not including the over 30s club, which is 6 drivers, which when you think about it is quite a moment, and 2 of those 6 are over 40. So well, not 2 of those 6 are over 40. Fernando is over 40. Lewis is not over 40. Not yet. He's getting there. So, get a good car under Lando Norris and see where that boy goes when, he's shown that he can get it on the podium. He was on the podium in Monaco last year. He and Daniel got their 1-2 in Imola a few years ago. So we know that it's possible, and we know the McLarens can be good. They're just not most of the time. But, fingers crossed. I believe they've stolen a Red Bull staffer for their team next year, so maybe they'll get some of those patented Adrian Newey secrets when it comes to their car. You never know. Now, as I said, I did say that Pierre qualified P4. However, he did not start P4. He started P10 because he got done twice for impeding. So Charles got done for impeding Lando in Monaco. So as soon as it was pointed out that Pierre had impeded, he got 1 for impeding Max Verstappen, and he got 1 for impeding, I think it was Yuki Tsunoda. Got 1 for impeding Yuki Tsunoda. So actually started P10. So, the top 10 was quite a different top 10, and there was, several different constructors in there. So you had Max, Carlos, Lando, Lewis in P4 in the end, Stroll P5, Esteban P6, Nico P7, Fernando P8, Oscar Piastri P9, and Pierre started P10. And we got a lovely, in the second half of the race, we got a lovely little battle between Pierre Gasly and Charles Leclerc, which was quite fun to see, and I bet you it was probably fun for them. It would have been painful for Charles being that far back, but it would have been entertaining for the two of them to be battling it out, considering they're really good friends. And so Gasly ended, I think Pierre finished P10 in the end. Yeah, Pierre ended up P10 in the end because of a penalty a 5 second, I think it was a 5 second penalty for Yuki for forcing Zhou Guanyu off the track, where I'm not really sure how he forced him off the track. Like, I personally didn't see it. Like, I don't think he forced him off. I think Guanyu had plenty of room. And just those photos of Yuki after the race being absolutely inconsolable and just so upset about his penalty, because I think he was without his penalty. I think Yuki finished like P7. I want to say he was in P7 or P8. So it would have been points for Yuki, and then he got that penalty, and there's just that photo of him with his trainer, Michael Italiano, and Michael's just holding his hand, and just the look of devastation on Yuki's face. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to look at. And I work in a hospital, so I've seen lots of things. But it was so upsetting. And I felt so bad for him because the penalty was just, like, it wasn't needed. It was absolutely not needed in any way, shape, or form. Like, there was plenty of room on either side of Yuki on the track for Zhou Guanyu. So I think sometimes the FIA and the stewards kind of just, I think they make really stupid choices sometimes. And they give penalties for things that don't really deserve penalties. And I think, so the thing with Charles' penalty in Monaco was it was a 3-place grid penalty, but Lando qualified like P9 or P10 anyway. So it's not like it's not like the penalty affected Lando in any way. And I know that we don't know where Lando could have possibly qualified because of it. But when it's a penalty like that doesn't really affect the drivers that you've impeded, it doesn't really affect them, your penalty. I think it's a bit weird. Like, I get it. I do, and I get that they have to be consistent, but it's also a bit strange. Like, getting a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Max Verstappen when Max is going to put it on pole. Like, 9 times out of 10, that's where he's going to be, and you kind of, you expect that to happen. So giving someone a 3-place grid penalty, like, I don't get it when it doesn't affect, like, when it has no impact on the driver that they've impeded. I don't get it. Like, I get that there's rules and there's regulations, but sometimes those sorts of things they confuse me, and I don't completely understand them. And I should have a better understanding of them than I do, but I don't. Maybe, after Canada, when I do my next podcast, I will bring it up again and we can talk about it. Speaking of Canada, that is the next race, and I believe we have a sprint race in Canada, so it'll be interesting. I'm so glad they've changed the oh my god, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm glad they've changed the format of sprint weekends, so you have sprint qualifying and then qualifying for the race. It just makes so much more sense. It makes so much more sense. If they're going to do sprint qualifying and then run the race based off the qualifying results, have you qualify for the main feature race in F1 in your grid position that you finish the sprint race. I think they need to do like a reverse grid like the F2 does, or they need to do something that's different. Speaking of F2, I want to do a quick little chat about 2 of the F2 drivers that I'm quite impressed by at the moment, and I really recommend that if you are following the other classes, so the F2 and the F3, that you do keep your eye on Ollie Behrman and Fred Vesti. Now, they both drive for Prema, which a lot of the current drivers started their careers out at Prema, or have been a part of Prema at some point. Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, to name a couple of those. Piastri was also part of the Renault Academy with Zhou Guanyu. But Ollie Behrman is a kid, literally a kid. He's just turned 18. Ollie is definitely one to watch. I can't wait to see him get in an F1 car and see how he does. Because I think it's going to be really interesting when we get that kid. When we get him in F1, it's going to be very different. And Fred Vesti as well. Just the 2 of them drove absolute masterclasses over the weekend. So And I was also quite proud of Arthur Leclerc over the weekend as well. I think he started P13 for the sprint and he did. He started P13 for the sprint and the feature race. In the sprint race, because of penalties, he ended up finishing ninth, which is just outside the points because in F2 in the sprint race, you only get points up to eighth. But then he did finish the feature race in the points, which was quite exciting. So I have this theory about the brothers Leclerc. Now I'm talking about Arthur. I have a theory about brothers Leclerc, and that's if there is F2 and F1 on the same weekend, you cannot have both of them do well. It's just a rule. So in Australia, we had in Melbourne we had Arthur on the podium in the, I think it was in the feature race. Yeah, in the F2 feature race, we had Arthur on the podium, and we had a Charles DNF. In Baku, we had Charles on the podium, and I think Arthur DNF'd. And then, yeah, in Barcelona, we had quite some good drives with Arthur ending up in the points, and Charles obviously dragging his tractor around the track. Now, Ferrari actually said that they weren't quite sure what the issue was with Charles' car. They were just going to send the parts back to Maranello and kind of see how it went. So hopefully by the time Barcelona, by the time Canada rolls around, which is not this weekend, it's the weekend after, which, by the way, I'm getting up at 4 a.m. to cover that race for you guys, like, because of the time zones. So I hope you appreciate that. So I'm hoping that they manage to fix the car. So, but, you know, during the race, I know I waffled and went on kind of a tangent. I'm going to talk about the race now. We had both the Mercedes on the podium, George and Lewis, which was, you know, I don't like George Russell. I think I've said this before. I don't like Lewis either. I've mellowed a little bit on my opinion of Lewis as I've gotten older. I'm a big Nico Rosberg fan, as well as a Nico Hulkenberg fan. I know I support German drivers 9 times out of 10. Seb, Nico, Mick, Michael. So I think that's probably where my dislike of Lewis comes from, possibly. But I'm getting mellow in my old age. I say my old age. I'm not that old. But my opinion, like, I still don't like him. I have respect for him, just don't like him. But there was also quite a funny moment with George where he reported that he was getting rain at turn 5, and then later on reported, is anyone else reporting rain, or is it just me and I'm getting sweat on my visor? It was just your sweat on your visor, George. It wasn't raining, it was just you. Oh, George. Sorry. But the race overall, like, again, it was a bit of a nothing race. I was so excited because I was like, yes, Lando's P3! And then Lando finished P17. He had a little bit of contact with Lewis on the opening lap in the first couple of corners. Got damage to his front wing and had to change his front wing before the end of the first lap of the race. So ended up P20. Finished P17, so he did get some clean, nice overtakes in at the end there. And I think Lewis got driver of the day. He did drive really, really well. Like, I don't begrudge him that. But the fact that Charles started in the pit lane and finished P11, P12, and then P11 after Yuki's penalty, I think, like, there's definitely driver of the day potential there as well. But, yeah, and then I think, where did Sainz finish? So Carlos finished P5 from being P2. The Mercedes just had it. I think they both, just the whole race, like, there was no way anyone else was getting past them. It was a bit disappointing that Fernando and Carlos didn't end up on the podium with it being their home race, being the Spanish drivers on the grid, and it would have been nice to see, but maybe next year. Hopefully next year. I don't think Fernando's going anywhere. Carlos definitely isn't going anywhere either, although depends on what rumours you listen to. Actually, I think after Canada, I will do an episode instead of having a break in between, and we'll talk about some predictions for the silly season. Or we might wait until after the next couple of races. I'm undecided on that one yet. But yeah, there's some rumors flying around about certain drivers ending up in other teams. Lewis Hamilton ending up at Ferrari, apparently. I don't quite see how that's going to work, especially when at the moment Mercedes are doing better than Ferrari. So why would he go to a team that isn't doing as well as the team that he's currently driving for? It just makes no sense. Um, but we will see what happens come silly season. I know what I would like to happen. It's not going to happen, but I know I would like to happen. But we'll save that for another episode, I think, and we will wrap that one there. So there you go, guys. That was my thoughts on Monaco and Barcelona. Don't forget, I will put in the comments the link to donate to the flood relief for the Emilia-Romagna region. And you guys can donate to that if you like. If you want to come find me on Twitter, I am at Kelsey_139 over on Twitter. Over on Instagram, I am Kelsey _ the Aussie Grid Girl. My TikTok handle is Little Rockin' Emo, Rockin' spelled ROCKIN. And then emo, all in lowercase, and you guys can come hang out with me over there. If you have questions or comments or anything that you would like me to talk about on the next episode, please feel free to message me those on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok. I'd love to be able to interact with you guys a little bit more and have discussions with my listeners as well. So yeah, anything that you want to know, it doesn't have to necessarily be race related. It just has to be F1 related. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those for me and I'll try and get back to you. And I will see you guys next episode. Once again, just quickly before I go, a big shout out to my editor Trent, who does all of the hard work behind the scenes for me, and makes me sound good so I don't sound choppy. And a big shout out to the guy that plays guitar on my intro and outro music, Mr. Aaron Bateman. It is Aaron's birthday on Saturday, so happy 50th birthday, buddy. I appreciate you and I hope you have a lovely day. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.